right, everybody. I was about to say good morning, everybody, but it's not morning where we're at. It's morning somewhere, but not here. So as we go into this study, a big part of it is that we want to tackle each of these subjects from multiple different directions where you read the book each week, do study on your own, and then we come in and we talk, and hopefully the discussion groups have a different flavor from your personal study, and then we'll have teaching, which hopefully explores it from yet another direction. But to that same point, to give you some other resources that perhaps you can look into, a couple of other books. One book we considered using for this course is called The Unfolding Word. The first slide up here will have the title of these ones. Book we looked into, we decided not to use it as our primary book, but it is one that I am reading along with. For example, on the section on creation, it does a lot of stuff about older creation myths. I know it's Scott Purcell's discussion group. That's something they talked about a little bit. But so like one more direction you can kind of tackle the subjects with. The book that we used when we taught this, an early version of this course a few years back was called The God Who Is There. It's from D.A. Carson. He is very intelligent, very insightful, and also very ADHD. He is all over the place. So for example, in the section on creation, I was very surprised how philosophical his discussion of nudist colonies was, because I wasn't expecting any discussion of nudist colonies in a book about Genesis 1 and 2. When it got philosophical, I was like, wow, this guy is very outside the box. I was not expecting that. But like I said, it actually ties into it of why were people unashamed, why do people are drawn to these colonies. It was very interesting, but once again, it's one more way that you can tackle this subject matter and try and really do a deep dive. Because when it comes to the Christian story class, the reason we're doing this is because this is what we thought would be most helpful for everyone in the church. Of like, what's the thing that would make every Bible study, every sermon even a little bit better? This is kind of where we gravitated towards. And in fact, original versions is going to be like running at the same time as men's and women's Bible studies. And we actually want all of the men and women to take this that are in the men's and women's Bible studies. So let's just do it together, teach it to everyone. Because the Bible, it's a big book, really thick. And even if you read it cover to cover, it's not the easiest to follow. It's not chronological. It's multiple different genres. It's repetitive. Sometimes there's histories that run side by side with one another. If you have one of these big study Bibles, there's quite literally hundreds of pages of charts, maps, glossaries trying to explain to you what you just read and giving you resources to understand it, because there's a lot in there. And so the whole concept of the Christian story class is trying to help you get that through line for the whole Bible and understand how it kind of works. So I think about it kind of this way. One of the most popular movie franchises out there right now is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They had a movie come out a few years back called Avengers Endgame. It was the 22nd movie in their franchise. It was the sequel to 21 movies from like 5 different franchises. It was the culmination of all the character arcs, all the plot lines, and they came together in this one movie. As this movie was coming out, I was delivering paint at the time, and my supervisor was like so excited to go watch the movie. But he hadn't seen the previous 10 years worth of Marvel movies. So we go see the movie, and the whole time he's like, why is everybody dead? Did you not see the last movie? No, I haven't seen any one of these in like 10 years. But everyone was so excited, so I couldn't wait to see it. I was like, dude, you're missing a lot of context. And so he could watch a scene and laugh at a joke, be excited by a big action set piece. He could understand when good things happen, when bad things happen, but he didn't understand the full context of what it truly meant in the bigger picture of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think so much about the way so many of us encounter different sermons, different Bible studies, different quiet times where absolutely you can get something out of it, but you get so much more out of it if you understand the full big picture. I grew up going to church. By the time I graduated high school, I must have heard hundreds of sermons, hundreds of student ministry talks, hundreds of children ministry talks. I knew all the individual stories, but if you asked me how all the different pieces went together, like why is there so much about Israel? Why does that matter? Why is there so many of these prophets? I couldn't have told you. I didn't understand the big picture of how it all tied together. So then eventually I went off to Bible college. I have a graphic of this. I felt it was very important for you to know just how spiky my hair was in college to fully appreciate this moment and how thoughtful I was. Look at how inquisitive I am at the moment. But went to Bible college and they had 3 different classes that were trying to teach us the big picture of the Bible because it was that important. Old and New Testament survey, going through the Bible book by book, helping us understand how that book fit into God's bigger picture. Sophomore year, then we had Progress of Redemption that was teaching us the story of the Bible thematically, big picture-wise. That's a lot of what this course is about. And then when I was a junior, I had a class called Bible for Teachers. That was all about teaching us how to teach people the story of what God has been doing all throughout history. So, in a very, very real sense, I have been preparing to help teach this class for 19 years now. So I'm very excited to finally put my college degree to good use. But hopefully by the end of this, you'll have that through line. So every time you hear a sermon, it makes a little bit more sense. Because it's not just this random thing. You understand the context. And even in sermons, like we'll say things like, well, the Pharisees were this. And we'll give you like the simplified version, the one sentence version, but there's a whole history why the Pharisees the way that they were. And every sermon is kind of like that, where if you understand that full context, it's so much more powerful, potent, and you get so much more out of it. And with all of that said, we're going back to the very beginning of the story, Genesis 1, and it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It all started with God's creation. First principle we have for today, God simply is. God is self-existent. Sometimes in your mind, you're trying to think of what it was like before Genesis 1, and you think about God floating around in a space. Well, for God to be floating around in a space, there would have to be a space to exist. God just was self-existent. Every worldview has to have something either creating itself, which makes no sense, or being self-existent. It's just always been. By definition, God is beyond. By definition, if God is God, he is self-existent. He simply is. To kind of give you some more advanced terms, one of the ways to discuss this is the cosmological argument for the existence of God. So if you're at the water cooler tomorrow at work and you want to impress your coworkers and drop some large words, the cosmological argument for the existence of God says, whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause of its existence, that cause being God. And then some people say, yeah, but what caused God? That's the whole point. God doesn't have a cause. By definition, God is self-existent. So everything else needed a cause. He is the self-existent one that just is and always has been. Built into the definition, God is not just more advanced than us, he is beyond us. Thus, Alpha, Omega, beginning and the end. That is who God is. Second idea, God made everything ex nihilo. Once again, trying to give you some fancy words, means from nothing. There was nothing except God, and then God made everything. He didn't compile the universe from stuff that also existed side by side with God. He made it out of nothing. There was only him. Boom. He makes existence, he makes a space, and he creates everything. It's all created by him. He's self-existent. He causes all. He creates all. Third idea. Creation proclaims God's glory. God created everything for his glory. It's not that God was sitting around lonely and he's like, man, I wish I had some friends. No, God, being glorious, created existence to display his glory, to make himself known. It says in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they put forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. Creation is screaming of the greatness of God. And that's why it was created, to do that. That's why we were created. Creation exists for God to be known and to be worshiped. Whole concept. He wants to be known. He wants to be made much of. He wants to be worshiped. So he creates this incredible universe that makes him known. So kind of moving along, you get into the creation account. And just to kind of like put it up real quick on the screen, I'm sure you talked about this in your groups as well as when you read through the passage, the different days of what God created. And once again, the whole concept is for him to be known and him to be made much of. Why is the universe so big? If the earth is just this speck in all of our universe, in a galaxy of a universe with many galaxies, we're just this tiniest of specks. Why is it so large? As the song goes, he's got the whole world in his hand. Actually, it's not just that he has the whole world in his hand, he has the whole galaxy, the whole universe in his hand, which just screams of just how big and awesome and great God is. Why are there so many weird creatures on this planet? Sometimes they weird us out, and like you turn over a rock and you just see these creatures crawl around. Why are there so many of them? And then you see pictures of the stuff at the bottom of the ocean, these wild, crazy looking fish. Because we have a creative God that just filled it with all sorts of different creations that just display his greatness, his creativity in all of it. Why are rainbows and the stars on night, aurora borealis, sunsets, why are they so beautiful? Because of the work of God. He created a beautiful universe that screams of his greatness, screams of who he is. So as we kind of move along through this, one of the other big questions that pops up when you talk about creation is, was it a literal or metaphoric? Were the days literal or metaphoric? And back in the 90s, that seemed to be like the biggest conversation there was everywhere, was battling that. It doesn't seem quite as heated as it was before, but there's perpetually kind of this tension between, well, do you trust the Bible or do you trust science? Which is a false dilemma, because God gave us the world and he gave us intelligence to be able to study the world, and his world, his universe that he created, isn't going to lie to us. And he gives us his word, the Bible, that tells us what he wants us to know about himself and the universe, and it's not going to lie to us. However, we can misinterpret them. We can be flawed in that. But it's not one or the other. We were designed to be intelligent, to be able to study and understand things. That's a good thing. And so you just have to think, balance that tension of God's word's not lying to us, God's creation isn't lying to us, so how do I properly interpret the two together? In this book right here, D.A. Carson says, I hold that the Genesis account is a mixed genre that feels like history, and it really does give us some historical particulars. And at the same time, however, it's full of demonstrable symbolism. Sorting out what is symbolic and what is not very difficult. And I think if you just kind of stop and think about it, I think that's pretty true. You stop and think about it, they're talking about days, but the earth is created on day 2. What is a day before the earth is created? If you define day as the rotation in terms of the sun, 24 hours to do that, if the earth doesn't exist yet, what is a day? And does it matter if it's a literal 24 hours in that context? Likewise, the sun is not created till day 4, and you get what does that mean exactly? Is that some big contradiction? Well, no, because it's entirely fair to speak in a language that people can understand. It's not designed to be a 21st century science textbook. And then it says, like in verse 3, God said, let there be light. Did God like literally breathe in air and speak out through his vocal cords? Or is it just entirely fair to say that's symbolism, that God spoke it and that communicates the idea of what he's doing, but does that have to literally mean his vocal cords were vibrating? So you just stop and think about it. You can think there's all sorts of imagery in there that it means exactly what it says. We're not trying to take away from trusting the Bible, but it also doesn't have to mean the exact literal thing. What is a day before the earth exists? Just you think about it, you go, oh, okay. Well, right. The important detail is that God did it. God created it out of nothing. He was the one behind all of it. To that idea, one of the big conversations about creation, like why do we believe in a God that created everything? There's kind of a discussion of what are those other evidences of God in creation? And so the discussion on kind of like intelligent design. Another big word for you guys, the teleological argument for the existence of God. Another one for your water cooler to impress your coworkers. But as defined by Wikipedia, the teleological argument is an argument for the existence of God, or more generally, that complex functionality in the natural world, which looks designed, is evidence of an intelligent creator. That's very clunky, sophisticated language. To put it simply, if you're walking on the beach and you see a watch in the sand, no one sees a watch in the sand and goes, look at this, is incredible. Look what the waves created. Like the waves were crashing and I guess they formed some glass from the sand, and then after enough time passed, we have a watch here. No one would ever think that. You see a watch on the beach and you immediately go, I guess someone dropped their watch. You also certainly don't see a watch in the sand and go, oh, if we leave this here and it gets hit by a couple more waves, it'll start getting more advanced and gain functionality. If we leave it here long enough, it'll get really cool. No one would think that, because if water storm hit the watch, it would be destroyed, not become more sophisticated. How much more so are humans complex creatures, animals complex creatures, that you don't think given time, this level of complexity would just fall together. Right along these same ideas, there's the concept of irreducible complexity, where that's to say that simple adaptation and creation, where you think like designing the Darwinism, where they talk about, well, giraffes' necks got longer so they could get food that was higher up. And you can follow a logic there of like, okay, the ones with longer necks they would do better, so there'd be more of them. You can like follow a logic there. But there's places in the human anatomy, creation, that doesn't work. Specifically the eye. An eye doesn't function until it's complete. If you have half of an eye, it doesn't do anything. There's not a version of it where it functions and does one thing until you get an eye that works. So you just have something that has to be designed. It has to be the completed version before it works. So the whole logic doesn't apply. It would be a weakness forever until it finally comes together. So it doesn't make any sense in that context. All this to say, getting back to where we're going, all of this, creation screams that there's a creator. Creation screams that there's a designer, that it didn't come about randomly. The whole idea is God is this incredible God that made a complex world filled with complicated beings and all sorts of systems, that if the earth was just a little bit further away from the sun, all of us would be dead. If it was a little bit closer, all of us would be dead. But he created this incredibly complex universe, galaxy, where we exist. And it all exists to make much of him. God did it, God designed it, and God guided it all along the way. That was his plan. So, where do we fit into all of this? Oh, actually, one more thing, important detail. As you go through the creation story, as you guys almost certainly discussed, When he created the earth, it was good. The stars, it was good. The animals, it was good. And then we get to that final part of creation, man. It says in Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image he created him, male and female he created them. And God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. So you go throughout creation, and you get to this final piece, mankind, that is somehow different amongst everything, where God created us in his image. And if you kind of go into the Hebrew words that they use in those verses, the one for image is tessalem, and the word for likeness is demut. I'm positive I mispronounced those. But with tessalem, the word image, it's used elsewhere in the Old Testament for a statue of mice, paintings of a soldier, or idols or statues representing deities. It's used for artistic works that represent something. That's how this word is used. That is the word used to say we are in the image of God. That idea of image, it's artistic works. And then demut, likeness, it's used kind of for the idea of resemblance, conceptually like, or the idea of kind of descendants. Like, wow, you look a lot like your mother. It's that sort of idea. You are not your mother, but you look a lot like your mother. You feel like that continuation of where you came from. The emphasis is on similarity. So when God is creating the universe to be known, to be made much of, to be glorified, he puts one thing in creation, one of his creatures, that is unique and distinct in that we are designed to be the representation of him in creation. Like we said, image is a word used for works of art. When God kind of puts his self-portrait in creation, it's mankind. Now, a picture of you, a painting of you is not you. It does not fully capture you, but in some unique way, it pictures you. That image, that painting of you, it's like you. In the same sense, we are like God in creation. Or as this book puts it in one sense, we are unique. We uniquely reflect God in creation. Put it one more way. Use as many illustrations to make this point. It's like we're God's metaphor for himself in creation. The best way to get a concept of God in the world, the universe, is mankind. And the perfect way to illustrate that, there was one person who lived without sin, Jesus. And he was God in flesh. And that's what the goal is of what we're supposed to be, is be like him. But final kind of thoughts on here. God is relational. We were meant for an intimate relationship with God. And even using that language is almost a little bit uncomfortable because the word intimate is so intimate. It's so private that it's like, oh, it feels a little bit weird when you use it in certain contexts. But you stop and think about the imagery in Genesis 2 and 3. It says in Genesis 2, Adam and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. And then just a few verses later, it's talking and it says, then the man and the wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. That they're walking around naked with God on a regular basis. And you go, that's uncomfortable, that's a little weird. But that's the way that God designed it. Intimacy. We were designed to have that relationship with him when there was nothing between us. And it was not just good, it was very good, because there was no shame. And we were meant to, in a unique way, reflect God amongst all of creation. Of all the things that he created, we are uniquely in his image, uniquely reflect him in creation. We bear his image. Every human is a bearer of God's image. Every human has tremendous value. And if that's one of those things, just even as your takeaway, it's so easy to beat ourselves up, have something about ourselves that we hate. God made you the way that you are, and you are made in God's image. Why are things like racism and bigotry just so disgusting? Because it's saying that people that are created in the image of God are less. It lessens the image of God. Everyone has tremendous value. Anytime people are dehumanized, when you're disgusted by the news and the way that people are being treated, it's because inherently we know people are made in the image of God. They have value and they should be treated with dignity. We're all created in the image of God. And I don't want to rob too much from next week, but this is also where sin becomes a big problem. We're designed to be in this world the image of God. But when we sin, we deface that image. We're still image bearers, but we're not being what we're supposed to be. The word sin literally means to miss the mark, and it's an archery term. And so often we think about sin as like a list of rules, and did you break one of the rules? But I think you can even think about it a little bit more conceptually than that. If we're designed to be an image bearer, we're supposed to be like God. To miss the mark is to act outside of being in accordance with being the image of God. And the perfect example of it, once again, is the way Jesus lived, the way Jesus loved. That's how we're supposed to live. And every time we sin, we get off track from being an image bearer of God. And we stop reflecting that glory the way that we are meant to. So to kind of close things out and kind of tie a few different things together, everything was created for God's glory. So that God could be known, so that God could be worshiped. We have been created in the image of God, as we have now said 1,000 times in the last 10 minutes. And then the first command that God gives in the Bible, it says, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. First point on this, a lot of times people say that God is a killjoy. He has all these rules. He's trying to stop us from having fun. The first command in the Bible is to be fruitful and multiply. Now, if you have any questions about how we do this, you can email me at trey@huttobible.com. I will explain all of it to you, how that works. He has multiplied his family even recently, so he knows very much how all that works. But this is the first command in the Bible. Be fruitful and multiply. And what is that saying? Fill the earth with the image of God. Fill the earth with God's masterpieces, with God's self-portraits. And then even as you kind of move along, jumping ahead in our story a little bit, sin's going to enter the picture. The image of God is not erased, but has been defaced. We are still image bearers, though we sin. And what have we been commanded to do as Christians in the New Testament? Go and make disciples. Share the good news, the gospel, where people can be redeemed, forgiven, and once again, wrapped in Christ's righteousness. And reflecting God once again, reflecting his glory once again throughout the earth. At the core of what God is all about is being known and being made much of. And our piece in that is we are meant to reflect God's glory by living for him, serving him, telling others about him, and being as much like Jesus as we can be, putting our faith in him so we are restored and changed by him. One of the key verses that our pastor absolutely loves, Habakkuk 2:14, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That's where all of this is headed, for God to be known and to be made much of. Let's pray.